Oh, it's a pig! Welcome to the Lake Erie Kayak Anglers podcast, the podcast designed to make you a better angler. I'm Chuck Earls from Lake Erie Kayak Fishing.com. Today we have Huron native Lucas Hahn joining us. He won the Lake Erie Walleye Trail Magee event East, number one, by a very slim margin of 0.04 of a pound. How you doing today, Lucas?
Good, Chuck. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Doing well. Thanks for joining me. So before we get into the fishing, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Lucas Hahn. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Lisa, and got two little kiddos, Garrett and Holly. Came from Huron, born and raised in Huron, and we live in Avon Lake now, not too far from Miller Road. Fishing's not my full-time thing. It's just something I've always really enjoyed and seemed to get into it more as I've gotten older. But my full-time profession is an air traffic controller, and that's what I do 40 hours a week. And I would love to do the fishing thing 40 hours a week, but that's not how I pay the bills right now, at least.
Right. So tell me what got you into walleye fishing?
You know, I always loved the outdoors. I grew up on a farm in Huron, and I've always been drawn to the outdoors, whether it was hunting or fishing. I feel like when I was younger, it was more of a hunting thing. And as I've gotten older, it's transitioned into fishing almost exclusively at this point. I hardly hunt at all anymore. My grandpa, my mom's dad, had a boat that we would get to go out on a couple times each summer, during summer vacation. I always loved that. Loved dock fishing, pier fishing. When I went to college, kind of got out of the fishing game for a little bit. And then when I got out of college and got my first job and started bringing some money in, really got the itch to want to have a boat. I'd say the catalyst of me really taking the dive in 2014 and 2015, I'm sure you can remember, we had phenomenal ice years. I mean, a month and a half long season with 18 inches of ice out on Erie. You could go wherever you wanted to go, pretty safe. And my dad and I really fell in love with walleye fishing. In 2014, I bought an ATV to be able to go out there and do it. And then in 2015, as the season was coming to an end, my dad and I are like, well, this is really kind of a bummer. Like, what are we going to do now? Like, how are we going to go out in the lake and, and do this? And at the time I was still living with my parents, and they live a stone's throw away from South Shore Marine, and they were putting on their annual spring fishing seminar. So I'm like, you want to know what, Dad, we're going to roll down there to this seminar and kind of, learn some stuff. I still remember who they had talking there. They had the Real Naughty fishing team. I can't remember all the guys' names that are on it. They still fish a LEWT event every once in a while. And they had Steve Carlson talk as well, and Larry Weiss as well. And on one of the breaks, we're walking around looking at all South Shore's boats, which I'm sure you're familiar, they weren't exactly in my price range at that time. I mean, they sell some absolutely gorgeous boats over there, but I was lucky enough they had a 2008 Proline 20 Express on a brokerage deal. And I'm like, well, this one looks pretty sweet. We can fish on this. It was within our price range. And I had a chance to meet a really good friend of mine, Mike Passadine, who sells boats out there. And we did the deal, and I mean, I was really fortunate I did. I almost have to credit Mike with getting me into the tournament fishing. I fished my first tournament ever. It was a Grady White Boat Owners Club tournament with Mike. I always say I think, and I never think, I always know. But I know we came in second in that, fishing in the southwest side of Lorraine Dump. And it was an inches tournament. I think we had like 143 inches or 142 inches. I mean, just something where we had a ton of, we were slabbed up that day. And that really like caught my interest in tournament fishing, and tried to make it work on my pro line for a little bit. I knew the pro line wasn't going to be the long-term answer for being able to competitively walleye fish. Just being able to get the spots and run the spots and, make a 40-mile run if I had to. The pro line just wasn't going to do that. And I didn't want that to be a reason to get discouraged on my behalf. I was competitive. I just wanted to win, right? Didn't care. It would go to any cost I could to make sure I win. Well, in 2016, I was up salmon fishing with an older friend of mine, John Barrent. We were up in Frankfurt, and Jason Fisher, who I knew from school at Kent State, was up there as well. And we're texting back and forth, and I'm like, well, let's meet up for a drink at Storm Cloud Brewing up there in Frankfurt. And we did, and we're just talking back and forth, and started talking about maybe wanting to try some tournament fishing and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I think that sounds like a lot of fun. Like we should give that a shot. And we did the following year. So I guess that was 2015. We talked. In 2016, Jason had bought a Ranger 620 that spring. And the first tournament we fished was a Battle of Lake Erie. It was put on by Josh Pugh. And that was out of, not 72nd. It was out of Edgewater. And there might have been like 30 boats. I think we came in 10th or 11th. We didn't have an awful showing. I mean, we didn't light the world on fire, but I mean, just from the second they call your boat number and Jason put the hammer down on that 620, it's like, all right, this is what I really, really want to do. And it was literally the next day or 2 days after that, Mike sends me a text, Mike Pasadine. He's like, hey, we're taking a 2014 fully loaded Ranger 621 in on trade. And I'm like, all right, yeah, I want to come look at it. And I'm like, let me come look at it. Went over there, saw the boat, and it's like, I wanted to pull the trigger on it, but we wanted to be smart. Had to talk to, my wife, Lisa, about it, and talk to my dad about it a little bit. And I got in my car, and I think I got halfway down Sawmill Parkway, and I turned around and went back. I'm like, no, I'm taking the boat, Mike. Let's do it.
Nice.
And so, so I guess I owned two boats for a little while, sold the pro line, started fishing full time in that 621. And the following year in 2017, Jason and I were teammates again. We fished the full LEWT circuit. We had a little bit of success that year. I mean, we were still trying to figure things out, learn, the ins and outs of tournament fishing. We didn't catch any fish our first tournament. Our second tournament, we stumbled our way into a 6th place finish. That was probably the best finish we had that year by a long shot. I had some success, like in some local, some smaller local tournaments. Did the Grady White Boat Owners Club tournament again with Mike, and I think we won that year. In 2018, Jason and I fished the LEWT again together. And I guess it'll, it's almost supposed to be, it's a joke between Jason and I. Whenever Jason and I fished separately for like the longest time, we always had more success. When I would fish the GWP tournament without him or the Grady White Boat Owners Club without him, we'd be a top 5 or top 6 boat. And then Jason fished a couple MWCs without me, and he had like a 4th place finish in one, and he had a pretty good finish in a Michigan Walleye Tour event too without me. So it's like whenever we're fishing apart, we're doing pretty well. And then when we fish together, it's like, well, what the heck's going on?
Right.
And in 2019, we changed our strategy a little bit. That was the last year that Jason and I fished together. And it was like, you take your boat, you do your thing. I'm going to take my boat. I'm going to do my thing. We're going to compare notes at the end of the week. And whoever had the better pre-fish, it's your show that week. We're going to take your boat, your program. The other guy's just there to, be like your co-captain for the day, but it's going to be your show. And that's when we finally started to have a pretty good chunk of success. We had a decent finish the first one of the year in 19. We had a 16th place finish, which we weren't stoked about, but we were in the right area doing the right thing. We maybe made one bad judgment call in the middle of the day where we got up and we ran around trying to put fish in the boat. We were concerned about getting 5 fish in the boat. And I think that's when Jason and I came up with the motto of like, you never leave fish to find fish. If you think you're in an area where you're on catchable fish, sit there and figure them out, and it might be just a bite window. They might bite for 2 hours really, really good and then be lockjaw the rest of the day. And then after that tournament, we had one that got blown out and got pushed back to another weekend. The third event of the year was out of Sandusky. We finished 6th in that one. And then we finished 4th in the championship in 19. And going into the 2020 season, Jason was given the opportunity to become the new LEWT tournament director, which he jumped on, and I'm glad he did. I mean, he does a phenomenal job as the tournament director, and he's really taken, I'll say he's taken tournament fishing on Lake Erie, I think, to the next level, not only with the LEWT, but a lot of the opens he does to try to get new tournament anglers into it, to at least give them a chance to try it out and see if it's for them. And then, acquiring the fall brawl this year too, and everything he's doing with that, getting the kayak division going and just bringing a lot of positive publicity and a lot of positive things into the fishing, tournament fishing world on Lake Erie. So, I mean, he made a phenomenal decision doing that. And I think we all owe him a big thank you for doing that as well, because it's hard to say where we'd be from a tournament fishing standpoint right now in Lake Erie without him. I guess going back to my story, in 2020, I started fishing with my dad, and the first tournament we fished was technically the third one of the year for the LEWT. That was the year of the pandemic. The first 2 were canceled. So the third one of the year was actually the first one. And I didn't really have a great week of pre-fish. I worked with few other boats. I work with, Ryan Yonkers and Cole Carlson. We've been working together since like 2019. And that was just a pretty organic relationship. They live close to me. We get along really, really well. We met fishing one of the GWPs, one of those local tournaments that they always had some success in, and we always had some success in. So we're like, we should start working together in these LEWT tournaments as well. But we broke the water down. They took a lot of the east stuff and I took a lot of the west stuff, and it just wasn't happening for me out west. And I think my dad and I kind of had low expectations for that first one of the year. We went down off of our teammates' information, and the first fish of the day we caught was like a 28-inch fish. It was down some shallow water off Lorraine. I'm like, all right, this looks good. The screen didn't look all that great to me. We fished it anyways for a couple hours. The screen didn't look that great. But it's like when your first one's a 28-inch fish, it's hard to pack up shop and leave right away.
Right.
But after a couple hours of just grinding and not getting many bites, and the screen kept getting worse and worse, I'm like, we're going to go try something else. And I went to a spot that is my favorite spot in the lake, out over near Avon. And we got all 6 rods in the water. I'd say within 5 minutes, we had a double on. One was, they were both weigh fish. One was like a 9-pound fish. The other one's an 8-pound fish. And as we're, about to get the second one to the net, another board buries. And that's what another, 28-inch, 29-inch fish. And my dad still talks about having 2 fish O's in the same net, because we only have 2 nets. And one of them was tied up with a 9-pounder in the bottom of the boat, and the other one had an 8-pounder in it. So we just put the other 8-pounder in that one. So it's like we go from having one big fish to 6 minutes in a new spot. We've got 3 tanks laying on the floor. And it's so like, holy crap, Dad, like we might, I think we got a shot. And we stayed there and we grinded on that spot. We caught 6 or 7 good fish that day there and came back. And I told my dad, I go, I don't know if we got enough to win, but I know we're going to be close. And Gary and Nick Zart were also fishing in that area as well. And they've been doing it a long time. Very accomplished tournament anglers, also teammates of mine as well. And I figured just from Gary and Nick being able to be so efficient, they're going to have more bites than what we would, and probably have us beat. And we were able to like just edge them out. I mean, they had like 40.87 pounds or something like that, and we had 41.13. Wow. So really narrow margin. And then and from there, my dad and I kept fishing together, and we kept having success. There was only 2 events, in 2020. We came in 8th in the LEWT and 10th in the MWC. We missed Team of the Year by just a couple points that year. I think we finished 3rd. That was the year that Mike Moken and his son Jack won. I think the Kissels finished 2nd. We finished 3rd. Just, 2-3 points behind. We're talking a fish away. And then the next year, 2021, my dad and I fished together again. The worst finish my dad and I had was a 10th place finish, and I had to have a sub for 1. And we didn't have a great finish, but we won the big fish pot, which was worth a pretty sizable check. And then we came 2nd in the championship. We finished 2nd in the Team of the Year points that year as well, to my teammates Cole Carlson and Ryan Yonkers. So that was really cool that year. The team of guys that we'd constructed, and like I said, it really was like an organic team construction. They won. We came in 2nd, Team of the Year, and the Zarts came in, I think, 5th overall. So the 3 boats we work with, that were in the top 5 for Team of the Year. So that was a really cool accomplishment as well. And then obviously this year we start off and we go out there and we get the win right off the bat. So I guess that's the story, a long-winded one. Kind of went from, knowing not very much to putting the time and effort in and grinding and keeping the nose of the grindstone and taking our lumps initially, but trying to work hard and ask the right questions to the right people. And you just pick up little tidbits here and pick up little tidbits there. And you really got to make it your own, the information your own. I mean, you can't just go out there every day and run a Blue Chrome Bandit 50 back, off a F can, because that's what these guys did the day before, and expect to have any kind of long-term success. I mean, you really have to start asking why. And I think that's what we did pretty well. I was always asking why. And you couldn't always get that answer. So sometimes you just had to figure it out yourself. And, but yeah, so that's the story. And I'm hoping the story's not done yet. Hopefully we keep writing some pages and stacking some wins and, cashing checks and having fun. And, at some point I don't know, my wife's always bugging me about, well, you should get your charter captain's license, or you should do something else with it. And I'd like to do something else with this eventually. I don't know what that looks like yet. I really enjoy the education aspect of it. I mean, I love talking and doing seminars and want to see people go out and have success. Doesn't mean I don't want to kick your butt on Derby Day, but I want to see people have success. And so we'll see where it goes from here. Hopefully some more tournament wins first, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah. Next up, we have Sandusky, right? April 22nd.
April 22nd.
We will be back after the short break. Today's podcast brought to you by Lake Erie Kayak Fishing.com. Come along with me and experience one of the best freshwater fisheries in the world while chasing monsters kayak fishing Lake Erie. We now return to the show. Are you doing the open?
I'm gonna do the MWC with it. That's that Co-MWC LEWT event. I was reluctant to do it. My tournament partner Russ talked me into it. I've got a Jason laughs about it, but I call it the theory of unpreparedness, where I will purposely not do things to cause a little bit of bad luck or perceived bad luck to have good luck. And it's, I know it has absolutely no backing to it whatsoever, but for whatever reason, it gets me in the right state of mind. And that's what I do. So I didn't want to do it. It's like, you just got to leave something off. So we're going to have to forget our net or something like that for those days, so I can screw something up. So if I didn't sign up for the MWC, it's like, we got to mess something up on purpose so we can, keep our luck going.
Maybe it's just to create a little bit of chaos and pressure. I tend to work best under pressure.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the same thing. When you're sitting on the fire, you really got to figure out how to get off, right? Same thing with, the water.
For sure. I think some of that as well. It makes me, if, let's say I didn't get into a tournament or on purpose when I should have, or I forget a net, or I leave maybe the tiniest little fray in a fishing line thinking if we catch a big fish, there's a good chance it's going to snap it. So I'm going to make sure we leave that out there, because inevitably something good will happen on something, bad. And luckily I've never had a line snap. I don't do anything to where I know it's going to cause, total chaos. It's always a controlled forgetfulness. But I think sometimes it forces me to trust what I see, and what I think, and what my plan was or was not going in. I think it just forces me to rely on me and my abilities and what I know I'm capable or not capable of out there. And it just kind of keeps me within myself.
Right. I think it's a great perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. You only know what you know. And I've always thought that Derby Day was not the day to go try something, brand new out. Jason and I used to tell each other all the time, it's like, man, we're not doing anything like that different, or we started off the day not doing anything, that's that drastically different of what the winners and the second place and the third place and the fourth place guys did. And we always had in our minds, it's like, we got to reinvent the wheel to, take Lake Erie by storm, right? It's like, what's this new hot bait? What's this new hot technique? And I'm not saying it's not out there, but in my experience doing this, you just don't try and reinvent the wheel. Take what you know, and if what you know is not working, ask yourself, well, why isn't it working? And what part of my experience can I fall back on that's going to get something to work without getting so far out in left field where you're just grasping at straws? It's always nice to have a baseline and, work from within yourself and what you know you're good at, and give yourself a shot.
Yep. So I have this thing on my front door. It says, you earn your trophies at practice, you just pick them up during the competition.
Yeah, I like that.
And really, just like you said, you go out there pre-fishing, you try some new things, you try some new techniques, you kind of, I don't know, throw some darts at the wall at that point.
Oh, for sure.
And then you go out on tournament day, and it's very important to trust your instinct and trust your plan. Don't second guess yourself. At least that was probably one of my biggest takeaways from the last event, because I I was going to fish in shallow in front of the stack, the power plant stack.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I got caught up in the moment. I wanted to get out a little bit. And by the time I got back in, I talked myself out of it. It was muddy water. I went back out, ended up catching the one fish I caught. But a couple of guys had some pretty good success in that muddy water. They're about 12, 14 feet.
It always kind of amazes me at what people are not willing to fish in the springtime around the reef complex. I can't give you like a number per se, like I need 18 inches of visibility, or I need a foot of visibility, or I need 2 feet of visibility, or I need to see my cavitation plate, or I need to see my prop. I roll up to a spot, I throw a bait in the water, and I feel like if it just looks right to me, and looking right means like, is the bait going to dive a little bit and it's not disappearing as soon as it hits the water? And there's different levels of dirty water as well. Like it might be muddy water. It might look like it's muddy water, but it's just almost like a tannic water where it's muddy, but you still have some visibility in there. And then you can have green water, which that's like the holy grail in the springtime, is if you can find nice green water. I typically hate fishing blue water in the springtime because it's cold water and the fish typically aren't in it, but I'm not opposed to fishing that. But I mean, if I can stick a bait in the water and I can see it for the first maybe, I don't know, 3-4 seconds of its diving, it's like, all right, yeah, we can probably catch a fish in here. I mean, everyone will tell you they've caught fish in mud, or they've caught fish in chocolate milk or things like that. It's like you maybe catch 1 or 2. I mean, there definitely is a fine line of being too muddy to where it's just a no-go, just not going to happen that day. And I wish there was some kind of like flashcard or magic pill to say this is the chart you're going to operate off of, but it's different. I mean, mud filters out light, and if you've got a really bright sunny day, maybe you can fish a little bit muddier water than you can if it's an overcast day. Like it's really a judgment call day of. And something else I think is important too that people tend to overlook is, I mean, mud does filter out light. If you are going to fish muddy water and you're over 25, 26 foot of water and you got all these marks down there at 21 feet, 22 feet, 23 feet. I mean, I've never had great success getting bottom fish to go in the reef complex in the springtime. I've always had better success with fish up high, even in cleaner water for that matter. But, it might be completely pitch black at 17, 18, 19 feet down because you got mud filtering all that light out. But if you can bring your baits up, even if you're not marking as many fish up there, I mean, if you're marking fish and there's fish in the area, they're not all going to be 21, 22, 23 feet deep. There's going to be the occasional fish that cruises through at 12 feet, 11 feet, 10 feet, 9 feet. Sometimes there's going to be fish up there that your boat's scaring away, and they're going to be out of your cone so quickly because your cone from your sonar at 9 feet deep, might be the size of a, half a hula hoop or something like that. And you're just not seeing them.
Right.
So fishing high in the mud too, I would say, is something to keep in mind for future events. If you get muddy water, maybe don't be so scared of it. Just change your tactic a little bit and use your sonar as a tool to see, do we have life here? Are there fish here? Even if they're not exactly where I want them, hang a bait or two up there and you might be surprised what you pull out of it.
Right. Do you use side imaging often?
When I am mud flat fishing, no. When I am structure fishing, 100%. So it just depends. I know some guys are talented enough with it where they can use their side imaging and they can see suspended fish and fish on the bottom off the side. In my personal opinion, over a mud flat where we're basin fishing, right? We're not holding a break line or a rock pile. I personally don't see the value in it, or I shouldn't say I don't see the value in it. I have not found the value personally to make it worth it for me.
Right.
but shallow water fishing over structure, 100%.
So what's your favorite walleye to target? Open water walleye or the walleye on the structure?
Oh, structure. Not even close. Not even close. I mean, I'll be honest, I hate summertime walleye fishing. Usually, the way the LEWT used to be, the last tournament was the first part of June, and you could still find fish on structure then. And you can find some walleye on structure, I'm not going to act like all the walleye go offshore, because that's not the truth. I mean, there's still plenty of fish to be had on structure. Your catch rate might go down quite a bit, and all of a sudden you're pulling catfish and sheephead and white perch and a lot of non-target species that can frustrate a lot of people. In the summertime, if I'm going to go target open water fish, it's either going to be silver or it's going to be a smallmouth bass that's not in open water. I mean, I'll go fish structure for bass or something like that. I tend to kind of leave the walleyes alone a little bit in the summertime, because dragging Dipsies and 300 coppers and 300 wires and down riggers, and that's just not my cup of tea.
Right.
If I have to do it, I'll do it, but it's just, that's not me.
Interesting. I would like to get far offshore midsummer, chase some steelhead, but I don't know.
Hey, if you catch the right steelhead, they might give you a ride back to back to shore for you.
To Canada.
Or over to Canada, which we didn't specify which shoreline, but they might head towards one of them.
Right.
That would be, I'd have to imagine that would be an absolute riot. I mean, just an absolute riot to do on a kayak.
Oh yeah, steelhead are a great time.
Yeah.
I don't usually. What's that?
I'm sure fishing around Avon, you've probably hooked into a few of them.
Yeah. And, when Lake Erie won't let me out, I'll go mess around in the tributaries. And at this point, a lot of my clients, they want to come out and catch a steelhead. So we'll go catch some steelhead, then we'll go offshore, catch some walleye, or target the steelhead offshore, out of the river mouths or off the East 55th breakwall.
I'm sure that's got there in the fall time off of 55th.
Oh yeah, that's a great time. All kinds of species. So what are some of the things that you do to dial in a tough bite? Obviously, don't give me any secrets that you're not comfortable with sharing, but
in my opinion, there's no secrets out there. Almost everyone does the same thing or some variation of it, right? I mean, maybe you do things a little bit differently, where if you're snap weighting, you like to have your snap weight 30 feet away from the bait, or 5 feet away from the bait, or 20 feet away from the bait, or a 50-50 method or something like that. Like, there's little nuances like that, but for all intents and purposes, I mean, trolling on Lake Erie, it's a crankbait, it's a spinner, or it's a spoon. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter on certain days, because there are certain days where you need to have that color or that bait, or, this speed or that speed. I've always been under the impression that walleye are apex predators, and if they're hungry, they're going to eat. Or if you can agitate them enough, they're going to eat. I think that might be a key right there that I start off with. Is this an agitation bite, a reaction bite, or is this going to be like they're on the feed bag type of bite? But I would say for me, if it's going to be a tough bite, let it be a tough bite. It's okay. I mean, it happens. It's how you manage that. Are you going to freak out and run all over the lake trying to find that hot bite that doesn't exist? Or are you going to trust the sonar and your electronics on your boat to say, well, there's fish here. I know there's fish here. I can see them. They're just not biting right now. So let's maybe not give up on these and just make really minor adjustments, right? Instead, if we're not getting bit at, 50, 60, 70 back on, crankbaits, let's try 70, 80, 90 back. Just minor adjustments, because you can't catch fish when your baits aren't in the water.
Right.
So if it's a tough bite and you can see fish, I would say I just make really minor tweaks. I don't do wholesale changes very often. Bump your speed up a couple tenths of a knot, or bump it down a couple tenths. Just play within the confines of what you're comfortable with. And I mean, tournament fishing, you're only looking for 5 bites, 5 quality bites. It's not like we're trying to go out there and fill a cooler, for clients in a charter or something like that. I mean, it's okay to not have a good day numbers wise. I know in 2020 for that MWC, my dad and I we fished 3 minutes it was a 3-minute run to where we fished from where we launched. And the way the MWC worked is, depending on what flight you were, if you were flight 1 or flight 2, they just do a rolling call, which there's a story for that we can save for another day. Jason and I almost learned the rolling call aspect the hard way. We were in flight 2 thinking flight 2 goes out at 8:30, and they start calling flight 1 at 8 o'clock. Well, as soon as flight number 1's last boat gets called, there's no intermission till 8:30. They start right into flight 2, and we had to scramble to make that work. But on that particular day, if you were flight 2 or flight 3, you gained like almost 40 minutes of fishing time. And it flops on day 2 or on day 1. So if you get the extra 40 minutes on day 1, you don't get it day 2. And if you didn't get it day 1, you get it day 2. I mean, it's fair for everybody.
Right.
But the reason I'm saying this is because we fished so close to the port, we ended up having 16 and a half hours of fishing time with lines in the water, baits in the water. And I think we had 14 bites, maybe. I mean, we're talking snail's pace. And some of those were in flurries too. It wasn't like a bite every hour. It might be 4 hours of nothing. And then there's a double and there's another one. Well, there's our 3 fish, and 2 of them were quality fish. It was one of those things where the bite was tough. What we were trying to do was a tough bite in general at that time, but I could see the fish in my electronics, and I trusted, my gut and my instincts and the pattern we were fishing. And we were okay with that. I mean, there were guys that were fishing in shallow going through 80, 90, 100 fish in an 8-hour day. But that's not what we were targeting. So I guess when the bite gets tough, it's all relative. I mean, right. You need 5 bites to have a stellar day. 5 bites in an 8-hour day is not that many. So just perspective, I guess.
Right. Just having the right tools in the toolbox to switch out, adjust. Do you ever use scent? Do you think that on the tough days, the scent kind of helps seal the deal?
I do not use scent. I am not going to sit here and say it doesn't make a difference, because maybe it does. Just in my personal experience, I've never had a day personally where I had a good day because of scent. I've never turned a bad day into a good day because of scent. If it's getting you like 1 extra bite or something like that, unless you can show some sort of pattern, I have a hard time saying you're going to get 1 extra bite because of scent, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Like the bait was in the water. It had a chance to catch a fish. I guess if you had a scented bait and a non-scented bait and you ran them next to one another for an 8-hour day, and the scented bait caught 4 fish and the non-scented bait caught 0 fish, then sure. I mean, there's a case to be made there. That's just never something that I've experienced. So I don't use it. I'm not advocating against it. And if that's what gives you confidence to have faith in what you're doing, by all means roll with it. But for me personally, I'm not a scent guy.
I think a lot of it is a confidence thing. If you go out there, you start running your confidence baits, the ones that you've caught a ton of fish on, well, because you run them all the time. That's your confidence baits. You're feeling very good. Maybe it's an energy thing. You're putting out that good vibe. The fish is like, oh yeah, I want to hang out with that guy.
Yeah.
What about direction? Like, do you notice on certain days one direction's better than the other? When you're not being successful, do you switch, go 90 degrees or 180?
I think a lot of that is trying to make the current work for you. I mean, if you think about it, Lake Erie's a river.
Right.
And the current can reverse directions. It's not like it always comes out of Detroit and rolls to the Niagara, but Lake Erie is essentially a big river. And the currents swirl. When I fish with my fish hawk, and I've talked to other good friends of mine that are pretty detail oriented about that stuff as well, we've been shocked at how much currents will switch in a given area. Like, you would think, we'll just use Avon Point, for example, like the current's all going to be the same. It's all going to be going roughly one direction in that little area. And that's not true. Right. I mean, the current swirls around in there. And with current, I mean, everything we do for the most part when we're walleye fishing is speed over ground. The salmon guys and the guys that are fishing 80, 90 feet down, obviously you got your fish hawk down. You're trying to find those subsurface currents because they can be dramatically different as well. But when we're fishing 20 feet, 30 feet from the boat, speed over ground usually suffices. But the fact of the matter is, it's not the same as what your bait is doing. And your bait's going to react differently at 1 mile an hour as it is 2 miles an hour. And then the depth changes as well. I mean, if you have a bait that is getting pushed up by current or pushed down by current, it might change, that bait by a foot or so. That can take you in and out of a strike zone if it's that tough of a bite and the strike zone is that, narrow, which sometimes it is. I would venture to say usually it's not, but sometimes it definitely is. So I will change direction more so to combat current or to help the current get my baits into a good profile, whether it's speed or depth or whatever, to trigger a bite. So yeah, I mean, the long short is, yes, I will change directions, but it's not because the fish like the bait going north today, or the fish like the bait going south, or they like it going east, west. It's how is that current going to make my bait, a target that day?
It's interesting you say that, because I always hear the fish prefer the bait going this way or that way. Well, as a kayak angler, we don't have that momentum that a boat does. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it really is focusing on the rod tips to understand, is that bait running the right speed? Is it doing the right action? What's going on underneath? So often I switch my direction, or I run a different direction, just because I know my bait's running right. I know the rod tip looks right. But I thought it was just kind of like for kayak anglers.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually consider that a huge advantage for you guys. I mean, anytime you can get that bait to telegraph into your tip, which is really difficult for us when we run boards to get baits away, because that board is going to absorb the
action of the bait. Right.
I always thought my $1 million idea, which would never be $1 million because our industry is so small, and people would be like, that's just snake oil, it's not going to work anyways. But when we fish out east and we're pulling wire or copper or anything where you've got just a ridiculous amount of line out, and you start dragging a little fish, well, that bait you're using might pull harder than what that little 8 or 9 or 10 inch walleye can do to it, maybe even a 12 inch, 13 inch walleye. But the second that fish hits that bait, it's not going to vibrate anymore. So I always thought, like, if I could somehow think of a way to get like a little, sensing device in a board that has a light that comes on or a light that comes off, the second your vibration goes away, it pops a red light. and it's like, okay, that thing's fouled up. And that would be beneficial for anybody that fishes, weeds or, anything where you can get fouled up. Because the second that vibration goes away and you have it in the rod holder in your kayak and you can see it, you're going to be 10 times more efficient than what I am. You can change it right there and then address whatever the problem is and get a clean bait back out there. Where for me with a small board, it's going to be, man, that bait hasn't touched a fish in an hour, or let's just, change this one up a little bit. And it's like, oh, well, shoot, I was dragging a 3-inch walleye or a 3-inch white perch or something like
Right.
that for God knows how long. And your efficiency level goes down. So I'd actually say that's a huge advantage that you guys have over boats that run boards.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the calm days, I do run boards because I can still identify the tip. But on the rougher days, it's a little bit of a challenge because I'm facing forward. I can't really watch, the boards behind me.
Right.
And I'm always fearful that I'm going to be looking at the other board when, my starboard board goes off. So I don't know. I was talking to Bobby Green about it on the last episode, and he likes to run Dipsies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, I like to run True Trip 40s during the summer on spoons or harnesses. And I was thinking, well, maybe on the rougher days, those Dipsies would be the solution to get my lines out far enough so I can run my third line down the center. Because on the real rough days, I won't run 3 lines because I'm not moving fast enough. My baits end up, tangling up. And like you said, you're not going to catch fish if your baits aren't in the water. So,
right. I know we're allowed 6 rods, and there are days where it's rough, or if the bite is good enough, I'm not going to throw out 2 more rods. I'm going to fish 4 because I can rip through these and be more efficient. And then instead of screwing around trying to get like another 2 rods out, there's times and spots that it's much, much more important for me to be on the wheel, staying on a spot, staying on a break, staying on a transition, staying on whatever it is that day that's producing the bites than screwing around with tangles, with, getting more rods out. So like, there's definitely something to be said about being smart about the amount of lines you have out there as well, to where you can keep them fishing efficiently, as opposed to just having 3 rods out for the sake of having 3 rods out.
Right. Yeah. More is not always better.
Definitely.
You never know. You might not realize that tangle or that snag. Next thing you know, you bring it in because you haven't had a bite for an hour, and your bait's all tangled up, your line's all tangled up. Now 2 of your 3 rods are out of commission for a while.
Yeah.
And at least on a kayak, on a fishing kayak, it's not really a good idea to sit there buried in your rod trying to figure it out for a while. You really need to keep your head on a swivel,
Yeah, absolutely.
watching conditions and boat traffic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's one reason I always bring at least 1 extra rod. That way, if something happens, one's out of commission, I wrap it up, stick it back there, grab my other one, put another line out. And then, at the end of the day, I'll figure out what the heck went, what went wrong.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to do on shore.
Yeah, it is. So one thing I wanted to get into, because I'm still trying to figure out this whole tournament thing.
Mm-hmm.
When I was standing there at the weigh-in, with my fish in my fish weigh-in bag, bone dry, been out of the water for about 4 hours, sitting there next to some frozen water bottles. And the guy in front of me has his fish. He only caught 1 also, but he had his fish in water and the light bulb went off.
Yeah.
And then I watched him dump the fish into the crate, and I seen the slime and I'm like, man,
that's weight.
That's weight. And then when you won by 0.04 of a pound.
Yeah. 0.6 of an ounce.
Yeah. Insane.
It's nuts. And you really think about 0.6 of an ounce, the second place team, I do not know. I will say they probably took care of their fish, and they handled them the correct way. But even in doing so, it literally could have been the difference between having this fish, you know, not even like burp weird, right? And like lose a little water out of its wherever, right? I mean, you're talking like that's chance at some point. It's
Right.
not chance to get into that position, but when it's that close, I mean, there were a couple teams that weighed that the wind blew, and when the wind was blowing, their bags were like 0.2 of a pound heavier, and when the wind quit blowing, it was 0.2 of a pound lighter. So
Wow.
you're talking, I mean, just minutia. It doesn't take much water or slime or anything. I mean, even air at that matter to make a difference.
Even if they release their bows, puke up a fish, all
That's the
kinds of ways.
worst. That's the worst is when you get in your live well at the end of the day, and it's happened to me. You have a 8-inch white perch laying in the bottom of your live well. It's like, oh, they're 1/4 pound. You know, sometimes it's just part of the game. But I know for me, I like to keep my fish wet and slimy and as healthy as I possibly can, because all those little ounces matter. And when you get into that position over and over and over and over and over, and you see that, especially right now with, how many quality fish we have in the lake, these things are usually won by fractions of a pound, I mean, and if you can manage your fish correctly and keep them healthy and keep them wet and try to get them to that weigh basket with as much just slime and water as you can on them, because that's all legal weight. I mean, it's not like we're not injecting fish with water. We're not one of my friends that fishes bass tournaments said that they've caught people cheating by adding salt to their live well, and through osmosis the fish will actually swell up a little bit and absorb more water, which is altering a fish, and that's 100% cheating. But that water weight goes a long way. I mean, keeping fish slimy and wet. I mean, every second there in like a bone dry bag, like you said, and you have some slime smear on the side of the bag and smear on your hand as you're putting it into a weigh basket. I mean, those are all hundredths of a pound that they're legal weight. I mean, that's part of your weigh bag,
Right.
that you're throwing away. I mean, it's just, it all adds up. I mean, it really does. It all adds up.
So what steps do you take to ensure that you keep all the weight? Do you keep your fish alive? You execute it?
I like to keep my fish alive. Part of the reason behind that is I like to call fish throughout the day, where I want to keep my fish as like least stressed as possible. So very rarely will I have more than 6, never more than 7. I mean, 7 at the absolute most, fish in my live well. And I have to be able to release a live fish. I'm not going to throw away dead fish. If I do somehow lose a fish in the live well, I'll typically put it in the bait well in the front of the boat on water. But I like to keep my live well at 5 fish. I don't want them bouncing around one another any more than I have to. So, and then I always know what I'm fishing for as well. I tag all my fish to make sure I know what my lightest one is, what my next lightest one is. And so that way, when we do get a new fish into the boat, tag it, throw it on a balance beam, boom, it's bigger than this one. This one goes in, this one comes out. Get it back into the water, watch it swim away if I can. If not, it goes into the front. So I would say on the water, I do everything in my power to keep those fish as least stressed as possible. I've experimented with fizzing fish, especially when we get a deep water bite and they don't have a chance to regulate their swim bladder, and their swim bladders used to being 20, 25, 30, 35 feet deep, and then all of a sudden you bring them up to atmospheric pressure and it expands and it puts pressure on their gullet and they're spitting stuff up and it's putting pressure on their organs and it puts them under a lot of stress. I've tried fizzing fish, I've had success both ways, some successful and some not successful. I don't tend to fizz them so much anymore. I almost think in the summertime, you'd be better off just throwing them in a cooler or filling your live well up with ice and just throwing them on ice. But then once you keep a fish, you're kind of stuck with it. I mean, you throw a fish on ice, you're not releasing that.
Right.
And I like to be able to at least give a chance to release them if I'm not going to keep them. So that, like live well management, like we talked, in the summertime when the water gets warm and that warm water stresses them, at the beginning of the day when the sun's not high and that surface water is as cool as it's going to be all day, I fill my live well up. I've got some ice packs from Cabela's that I bought, like their Arctic ones that freeze down to like -5 or -10. And I will throw those ice packs in the live well and get that water cooled down. Even if the water temp's 70 degrees and I can get that water down to 55, 56, 57, anything I can do to bring that water temperature down, that's going to slow that fish's metabolism down. It's going to give them a better chance of survival in the live well. And then I'll also add some G juice to it, which helps get some of the ammonia buildup out of that live well as well. And just try to keep those fish as healthy as I can. I don't want a fish to die and slime out and all of a sudden the fish is dead and it's slimed out a 1/4 pound. That might be a bit on the extreme side, but I mean, if it slimes out, 0.04 pounds, that might be the difference between a $3,000 check and a $15,000 check.
Right.
So, anything you can do to keep those fish healthy, like you guys in the kayak, if you could find a good way to get them on a stringer and not get a bunch of, pressure on their gills, pulling their gills and keep them swimming in the water. I mean, I'd have to imagine they'd stay alive for a while for you.
Well, usually what I do is I hook them through the lip. So I don't even go through the gills. That way the stringer's not beating them up. Plus they tow a lot easier. I mean, usually after I put a fish on a stringer, I don't release it. But it's something that I've been trying to figure out, competing in the LEWT, because I only have 6 slots. So I only have 6 opportunities. So how do I do that? If I catch a 15-inch fish, if I catch a 16-inch fish, do I just decide to let it go and risk going back with one less fish?
Which that's not always. A really good friend of mine came second place in the NWT. It was Ryan Buddy came second in the NWT. That might have been 2018, I'm thinking, or 2019, and had a phenomenal day 1. And his day 2 started off really good as well and had a couple slobs in there. And if he could have caught one more fish, I mean, we're talking even like a little 16-inch or 17-incher for a 1.5 pounds, he wins the event. So it's important to make sure you're taking all 5 fish in, because you're better off weighing a 1.5 pound fish to give you just a little bit more weight than leaving that slot empty. But the dilemma that you're talking about, I can totally understand. I mean, you don't want to keep a 15-inch fish or a 16-inch fish. All of a sudden, you upgrade a couple fish and you've got dead fish there and they're not going to go for you.
Right.
So that's really interesting. That's not something that I have any experience in yet. Some of these other lakes are no call tournaments. So when you catch a fish, they'll allow you, 6 slots, 5 fish, but you can keep 6 fish. The second you take one of those fish into your possession, it's yours.
Right.
So then you have to make a judgment call on, I know I can catch, 4 fish bigger than this one, or I don't want to risk throwing this one back. And that adds a whole nother layer to doing your homework as well ahead of time. But that's really interesting. I wish I had like a great answer for you on that one, on what to do, but that adds another layer to it. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit more complicated. looking on the bright side, at least I'm allowed 6 fish and not 5.
Yeah.
So I do have one slot that kind of helps. I mean, at the end of the day, if I go out there and I catch, 5 good fish and 1 average fish, I'll just probably head into the weigh-in anyways. I mean, what am
Yeah.
I going to do? I don't really feel right about releasing a fish off the stringer, and especially in the summertime when it's that water temperature is 70, 80 degrees at the surface. I'd almost rather just execute them, get them on ice and stuff. But like you were saying, now they're releasing their slime. Now I'm losing weight. So
I think if you execute the fish, knock them on their head.
yeah,
Obviously, you don't want to like bleed them out or anything because there goes
right.
weight. I've never personally done this. This is just from what I have heard from people that I trust. If you knock a fish out and you get it on ice right away and you shut that fish's system down, you're not going to lose a whole lot of slime or a whole lot of weight. So that definitely would be, I mean, if you catch a 29-inch, fish, if you're worried about throwing that one back, you've got a good problem on your hands.
Right.
So maybe that one would be a candidate for just knocking out and throwing on ice. I don't do it. I can't tell you firsthand if it works or not, but people I know that I trust say that it's probably the best way. What maybe you gain as well and what you lose in any slime weight whatsoever. If you're catching that fish deep, a dead fish isn't going to spit up a white perch in its gullet. A live fish that's really healthy, can still spit up some shad or still spit up some white perch or spit up some, stuff you don't want them spitting up.
Right.
So, that definitely would maybe be an option to think about for you.
Do you think it's better to just throw them on ice, or would you prefer icy water?
I would say icy water.
Icy water.
Like a slurry, like an ice water slurry. Because then when that fish comes out of that ice water slurry, you're taking a wet, sloppy fish out as opposed to
a cold, dry fish.
No, a cold, dry fish. I'm going to take the wet, sloppy fish over the cold, dry fish any day of the week.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Do you have room on your kayak to put a cooler like that?
Not really, because I carry way too much tackle.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have like a catch bag that I can put them in, kind of roll it up, but it doesn't really hold water. I could probably find a way to figure out how to hold just a little bit of water, and I can then put it in my front hatch out of the way.
Okay.
And it's big enough to hold, 6 big fish.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the fun part about it, is just figuring out what the challenges really are.
Yeah.
And what the solutions are.
This is all like pre-fishing stuff too, right? I mean, when you're saying of, you win your trophies during practice and you just pick them up during competition. I mean, this is all the practice aspect of it as well, is figuring out how can I make sure I get my fish to the scale in prime condition for the best weight I can do while still being within the rules and not altering fish.
Right.
Not shoving fish down its gullet. Or people often say, well, why don't you just feed them while they're in your live one? I'm like, it's altering a fish. You can't do that. But I'm going to make sure the fish I do catch are going to be as heavy as they possibly can be. So I am weighing them in a prime condition.
Right. The last thing that I wanted to touch on, you had mentioned that you generally make your own maps. I know on Lake Erie, we do have Navionics and we do have some mapping, but it's, I think, from 1994, if I remember correctly. And I know they're actually coming out to do some fresh sonar this year.
Awesome.
But I found it intriguing that you go out there, you make your own maps. So you're finding those points that nobody else knows about.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really more of an efficiency thing for me, where when I'm going out and fishing one of these classic structure spots on Lake Erie, I want to know where all these little features are, because even though there's an area that has a good bit of structure, there's still going to be spots on a spot that fish tend to congregate at. And if I start catching fish on one particular feature on a structure spot, I might know of 5, 6, 7, 8 other spots that are similar to that one, where instead of just mindlessly trolling along that piece of structure, I can introduce a sense of purpose to it. And I'm going to go from this one to this one to this one. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But when it works, it's like, one, it's a good feeling personally. It's like, hey, I unlocked something today. Like I was dialed in today. This is a good day. I mean, I think one of my most rewarding trips ever was identifying a pattern that we had going 20 miles to the east on a particular piece of structure. I went and, it was actually off of Huron, and this piece of structure was down towards like the Sheffield area. Brought it back to Huron, found a similar piece of structure, and pulled 4 tanks off of it. I mean, like 8+ pound fish.
Nice.
And those were the only fish we caught, but it was like, we connected the dots that day, and we made a pattern down there work in a completely different area. And that was a really, really rewarding experience. I think that was like 2018, 2019. It was like one of those light bulb moments where stuff started clicking a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, when I make my own maps, and that's, I think, why I use side scan a lot as well, is you can start to create a 3-dimensional picture in your mind, and you can correlate it with your 2D as well to see like the fish arches and where they're relating in the water column. And my goal when I'm fishing a structure spot is to take all the information I have available to me through 2D and side scan, and I can actually, in my mind, I can actually like see, like I can see it, if that makes any sense. And then I can, see where my baits are running in relation to them. And if I want to knock them off rocks and things like that, like I can see baits knocking off of rocks and getting reaction strikes. And I just start to like see that picture in my head and then make adjustments off of what I'm seeing in my head as well. So right. Anytime you can do, I'll go back to your, the saying of, you win in practice and you just pick up the trophy during competition. Practice is just not the 3-4 days leading up to a tournament. I mean, it's all the time that you put in, even during the off season. I mean, before kids, there would be days where I would just go out and drive around structure for 3-4 hours and just graph and just look at it. Never fish, just drive around and graph, because I wanted to really understand what was down there and what I was looking at. And it helps you out tremendously with that particular spot. But then you can go to a different body of water that you've got no familiarity with. And because you put the time and work in learning your electronics and understanding what you're seeing, you can unlock that, new piece of structure or new piece of water a lot more rapidly because you're proficient with your tools. Right. So yeah, I mean, practice is just not the 2 or 3 days before a tournament. I mean, it's the months and the years of time that you've put into learning all those little nuances that really pay off.
Yeah, you know what they say, an overnight success is usually 10 years in the making.
Yeah. Yeah.
The interesting thing is, I think you get to a point in the evolution of an angler where you realize it's not just the fish you're after. It's the why. It's questioning everything. Why did we have such a successful day? Why did today suck? What did work? How did we finally dial them in? Where did we find them? Where were they sitting? And I think, using those tools like, your personal made mapping, like you said, it builds that understanding in your head where you're actually visualizing this. You're visualizing what's going on underwater because you've seen it on the sonar and you fished it 100 times. You know what's down there. Okay, well, the fish are on the west side. They're on the east side. I'm going to go this direction. I want my bait running this way. And I don't know. That's an interesting concept. I think I just picked up a Garmin 73 CV.
Okay. I'm not real familiar with the Garmin. I've got some friends that use Garmin and they rave about them. I don't have a lot of personal experience with them. So with the Garmin 73 CV, would that be in line with like the HDS Live series or like the like a Solix from Humminbird or something like that?
I believe so. It does have the live capabilities with the new transducer.
Okay.
Actually, I got it from Jason Fisher, so it was cool. One that was on his boat.
Nice.
Last year.
Nice. The live scope thing is something that I have not had a lot of work with yet. It's something that I'm sure at some point is going to be a major player on Erie and other big, trolling bodies of water. I don't want to say it's not there yet because someone may have already unlocked it and figured out a way to use it to their advantage. I do think at some point in the future, again, not next year, the year after that, but like just the way Lake Erie is cleaning up as a whole, I could see our fishery moving towards what some of the other like large, really clean water fisheries are, where they're casting at structure. It's hard to troll over some of those areas because the structure is confined and the water's so gin clear, the fish get really spooky. I think we're a long ways away from that, but I know if and when we do get to that point, one, I want to be prepared for it. And two, I mean, at some point, I don't want to fish Lake Erie forever. I'd like to start doing tournaments in other parts of the country and maybe get into the National Walleye Tour and start doing some of those events. I mean, right now, just between, life, it's not a feasible thing for me yet, but it will be. I mean, it definitely will be at some juncture, and I'm going to need to be proficient with that if you want any chance of competing on other bodies of water. So I think for you guys too, with the kayaks, that would be, I just have to imagine your ability to be, highly maneuverable and can break down a piece of structure and use that live scope. I mean, I'd have to think that would be, truly just, sniping fish off of a small area. Anytime you can be maneuverable like you guys are, there's times where I wish I would be in a small boat like that to where it'd be a piece of cake to stay and also be stealthy at the same time too. I think that's probably just a huge advantage in certain situations.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. Eventually, I don't know, at some point, maybe not this year, if I somehow, some way cash a check, come in, top 10, somewhere like that, maybe pay for the live scope.
Yeah.
That would work.
Yeah. Reinvest it, right?
Right. Always.
Yeah.
But I think it would be a game changer. I wasn't really thinking of it like that. I was thinking more on the blow days, inland chasing, greenbacks or crappie or something like that. But I would really love to just sit off of some of these places that I've been fishing for years and just see what's really going on. I've often thought about, getting diver certification, trying to get, take a diving trip down there.
If you do that, the amount of money you would make reselling baits from all the baits that are hung up on some of those spots, you might be able to retire a heck of a lot earlier. I mean, there's the amount of baits. I've thought about that. Me, not personally going out there and diving, but if you do that, I think you would be shocked at the amount of baits that are hung up on some of those spots.
Yeah, you're probably
Maybe
right.
you wouldn't be. I mean, I'm sure you probably got your fair share hung up on some of these spots as well, but I know I've got a special mate or two of baits hanging off of rocks down there somewhere.
Well, I'll tell you, in the kayak, it's a little bit easier. See, on a boat, you have that forward momentum. It's going to put pressure. You're going to snap off a lot quicker. And if you don't, are you going to pull in all the other lines to go back and try to go the opposite way? With a kayak, if I get snagged up, I just bring in my other line and I go back the opposite way. And 9 times out of 10, it pulls it out.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I mean, I wish I could do that sometimes, but like you said, when there's 6 rods out there, it's with boards. It's sometimes more advantageous just to, swallow the hurt for a little bit.
Donate one to the fishing gods.
Keep going. Yeah. Yep. It just that I will say there are some baits though, that I would do that for, that I have done that for. There's not many baits in my box, but there are a few baits that I would stop the show to go back and get.
Right. Yeah, I have a couple like that.
Yeah.
A couple of them probably should be hanging up on the wall, but
yeah,
they just
retire them.
They produce so well.
Yeah. Yep. Some baits just have that whatever little wiggle or rattle or whatever it is about them. I mean, sometimes they're just fish catching baits. Doesn't matter what day, what the conditions are. It's just whatever that bait's got, it's got it.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions that I had for you.
All right, cool.
It's been a great conversation, great journey. I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy it. Like I said, anytime I can talk fishing, that's always a good day.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
So, if you can't go fishing, you might as well talk fishing, right?
1000%.
Yeah.
All right, Lucas. Thanks for coming on the show, brother. Yeah, I will see you a couple of weeks in Sandusky. Looking forward to it. Yes, sir. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.
Hey, guys. Thanks for listening to the show. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening app. We will see you on the next episode. And remember, for me, fishing is life.